Okay. Okay. Today is the second 25th anniversary celebration of this fall season. The first was our own 25th anniversary at the first day of class. And today we are celebrating the Crow Shadow Institute of the Arts 25th anniversary. It's located on the Umatilla Reservation and is focused on using art, especially printmaking, as a tool within the Native American community. Our speaker this afternoon is Frank Jansen, Tamaran Master Printer of Crow Shadow. He moved to the Pendleton area to become Crow Shadow's first full-time resident master printer. An artist in his own right at Crow Shadow, he collaborates, and he emphasizes that word, collaborates, with artists of all ages and skill levels, from local high school students to emerging and established Native American artists to gifted print artists from around the world. It is particularly significant that this 25th anniversary celebration is his retirement year, and how lucky we are to have him here today to share with us his knowledge of Crow Shadow during the first hour and the art of printmaking the second hour. This is the kickoff for an event celebrating the opening of the current show at Halley Ford. So let's welcome Frank.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Sharon. And I want to thank the Institute of Continuous Learning to having invited me here, and all of you people for coming to listen. We're going to change this onto the slides here, if I can do this. There we go. Okay, Crow Shadow Institute of the Arts. As Sharon said, it'll be in two talks. Basically, the first will be to talk about Crow Shadow and events that have happened over the last, 25 years. I've only been with them for 16. But as Sharon said, also the Crow Shadow Institute of the Arts is located on St. Andrew's Mission, which is on the Umatilla Indian Reservation. The Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation consist of the Umatilla, the Cayuse, and the Walla Walla. And the building itself was built in 1931, but was essentially closed in 1972. And James Lavador is our founder. Many of you might know him. The cover on the book was actually a set of prints that we did a couple of years ago, and he's a major painter. He started painting when he was 7 years old, totally self-taught, and in 2013 he was in the Venice Biennale. So very prestigious. The tribe, even though we are not affiliated with the tribe administratively, they have been very supportive of Crow Shadow because we're part and parcel of trying to incorporate young artists and bringing art to the reservation and bringing the rest of the world to the reservation. So it's a two-way street. Now the tribe, the support from the tribe has been many different forms. One, first of all, we're registered as 501c3. That's a nonprofit. That's hang on by the skin of your teeth, okay? Many of you have probably worked in 501c3s, you know what that's all about. But some of the major things that they did was they did a huge purchase of prints quite some time back, and they purchased the prints and then donated them to the Native American Student and Community Center at the PSU campus, which was fairly significant. Then when the Wild Horse Casino did an expansion, they purchased another large set of prints for around the casino and also for the high-end Plateau restaurant. Shortly after that, they built a new governance center and another major purchase of prints that can be viewed throughout the new governance center, which is pretty incredible. So we are not a teaching institute, but we're located in this incredible view, this incredible spot, and the foothills of the Blue Mountains. And let's see if I can do this. So when Jim looked at this building it would have been in the early 90s, he was working for the tribe, but he was only about a handful of people who did work at that time. They didn't have a lot of money, and it took Wild Horse, the casino, to actually start generating funds so they could bring into play a good administration. So they had this building, this is what it looked like initially, and it was pretty derelict apparently until it was rat infested and the gallery floor was rotted out because there was a stream running underneath the building. And they had thrown every bit of leftover yard sale stuff into this building. It was just a junk heap apparently. I didn't see it, this is what we turned it into. Okay? This is our gallery. It's almost about 2,000 square feet. We have full kitchen facilities behind us. And so the idea of Jim starting Crow's Shadow, Jim and friends, Philip Cash, was because they wanted to give back to the community. So Crow's Shadow is a conduit to provide educational, social, and economic opportunities for Native Americans through artistic development. And as I said before, bring the tribe to the world and the world to the tribe. So the initial funding came through the tribe again, through the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Then the major funding came, so that's the studio before, and this is the studio after. The major funding came from the USDA, Department of Agriculture. Why? For rural and economic development. Okay? And about a number of years ago, I'd say about 5 or 6 years ago, we became their poster child. They fund art as well, which is pretty cool. So the renovation happened, and this is what we ended up with. And so when I arrived, this particular press, the blue press that you see in front with the stone, did not exist. It wasn't there. It was donated to us by this lady from Richland, the Tri-Cities. She asked me if I wanted a bunch of stones, and I said, I didn't say a thing. She says, litho stones. And I said, I know what you mean, how big and how many? Oh, we got 2 this big, and about like that, and I tried not to drool from my mouth. It was pretty. So when we pulled up to her garage and to pick up the stones, she says, I don't think we're ever going to set this up. Do you want to press as well? $15,000 donation, just like that in 2002. I didn't think we'd ever print on stone. We'll talk about more about process and stone and working with the artists in the second half. But earlier on, going back to before the studio was actually set up, there were a lot of workshops held with traditional arts, basket weaving, beadwork, cradle board making, all of that, working with at-risk youth and providing exhibitions for their wares. And then workshops such as this. In 2000, Tim Rollins, this is the guy in the black hat, he's from KOS out of New York, Kids of Survival. He worked with at-risk youth. And usually, traditionally, this was a 1-week workshop. And he gets them to read pretty heavy stuff. And in this case, with the tribal youth here, they read Midsummer Night's Dream by Shakespeare. And he had them memorize some of the lines apparently as well. So then what they do is they take the pages, either copy them and glue them onto a canvas. Okay? And then they did all these little shapes, these little, they're actually like taking paper and doing a Rosarch thing and then cutting them out. So there's one pair on each one, so you can spend hours trying to match them up. Okay? This is a wonderful workshop. This is before my time. But it was very, very important. So it was, try not to move too fast. One of the major events that happened at Crow's Shadow was the symposium, Conduit to the Mainstream. This was in September 2001. This is when I started, or I was supposed to start. They invited and got funded through Art 21 and various other organizations to bring in these very important figures from around the country. You're talking from the art world, you're talking the artists, you're talking curators, you're talking with a group of artists that have been working for a long time. People like Kay Walkingstick, Edgar Heeper Burrs, James Luna, Truman Lowe. They also brought in people like Marjorie Devon, who was the director of the Tamarind Institute, and I'll talk more about the Tamarind Institute because I am a Tamarind master printer. And it was an honor to be with all these people, and one of the young emerging artists was Marie Watt. And she was in awe, and she's on the lower right-hand side. She wasn't totally in awe to be with her, not her peers. These are the gods and goddesses that she looked up to. Now herself, because of that connection, she is a major artist. This was a very important event. It helped us sort of set the goals of what we wanted to achieve. So I am the first full-time resident master printer at Crow Shadow. Previously, like I said, there were a lot of workshops, but one of the problems was that Jim felt that they were getting away from the prime focus, that was to set up a print workshop. He had been to Rutgers Innovative Print and Paper to do a residency. And Eileen Fody, who was a Tamarind master printer, is in this photograph. She was amazed how much he fell in love with printmaking. He's not a printmaker, he's a painter. But he lets people like myself, who are a collaborative printmaker, to do the prints for them, but he does the conception. So he thought it'd be a good way of providing a way for young artists from the tribe to disseminate their artwork faster and further and less expensively than one single painting. So you do a limited edition of 10, you have a potential of 10 clients. You do one painting, you only have potential of one client. That's really what it's all about. So it's economic, but it's also social. So when we first arrived, we got contacted by a lady in Sydney, Australia. And she was working at the Sydney Institute of Arts, and she was working with 12 Aboriginal artists making prints. They wanted to do a print exchange with a group of Native American artists. So she contacted me. Now this was early 2002. And I said, sure, yeah, great. But then we were still new there, we didn't know a lot of artists. And it sort of slipped our mind for a couple of months. So I finally got some artists together, and I contacted her, and she says, oh, we contacted the Institute of American Indian Art, and they're in right now with 13 artists. And I went, oh, well, can we make it a three-way exchange? Yeah, okay. So it's a total of 37 artists. So I worked with 11 young students here from the tribe and from the area. The idea was that they were kind of excited. We were going to be doing lino cuts. I don't know if everybody's familiar with lino cuts, taking a piece of linoleum, carving it, inking it up, and printing it. And they said, what do we have to do? I said, you have to print 45 good ones. Okay. What if we have to print two color? What if we want another color? You have to put it through the press again. We'll stick with one color, thank you very much. Anyway, they did a fabulous job, and so we made them a portfolio. So here they've just received their portfolio for their opening reception. And one thing they didn't quite get was I said, you have a portfolio of 37 prints. These are artists from Australia, from all over the US, indigenous artists. It has value. And they go, value? $, value. Yeah, I don't know what it is, but you have something of value. As they walked around eating chocolate cake and holding the portfolio like that. The other thing was, I says, you guys have just shown internationally, because there was an exhibition in Sydney, Australia, there was an exhibition in Santa Fe, and there was an exhibition in our studio. So this was a pretty important event, and I hope it got through to them that here is something that can be done to further their artwork, and printmaking makes it a lot easier. So this is part of the exhibition, and there were some very ingenious prints done. The Institute of American Indian Art, they did have a printmaking department, so they were a little bit more sophisticated than what we were. And their artists were ranging in age from 18 to 50. So they got to do multicolored prints. We kept it down to one color. A lot of the other workshops were like basket weaving, and this is Joey Lavador, who's a master weaver from the tribe. He's Jim Lavador's brother. Absolutely incredible. Making cradle boards, and then beadwork. And this is making horse regalia, which absolutely was phenomenal. And these people would all get together, and they spent a whole weekend. And I think this horse regalia went for about 2 weeks. It was pretty amazing. Beadwork and leather work and all of that. So you let them use the gallery. They can use the gallery space. If they want to get in the printmaking studio, if they need more tables, they can go there as well. So it's quite open. One of the other things that we also do is when we invite artists to do an artist residency, we ask them to interact with the local community. They can either be in the form of a workshop, a talk, or some other method of getting students involved, getting community involved. And in this case, this is Ramon Murillo teaching them drum making. So we got all the materials in, and he taught them how to make drums. One of our first major events in working with the local tribe was in 2004 when Nick Yahweh Community School was started. It's a charter school based on art and culture. And we were the arts component because they don't have a high school. They were just using gymnasium as classrooms. The enrollment was small. So the funders looked at Crow Shadow and said, art. So they used to have a room upstairs that they cleaned out, Jim's old studio, and they used that as their homeroom, as their classroom for making art. So one of the first things we did was actually a fish print. What a shame, taking a salmon and inking it up and printing off it. But it worked, and they got really excited, and then they added color to it. So that was probably the first print project we did with these young people, and they were great. That went on for about, if I recall, 5 or 6 years, and then funding was cut. And guess what gets cut? The arts, all the time. So there was a hiatus there for the longest time until 2015, when we had Michelle Van Pelt, who works for the school, get a number of students together and start printmaking again. The one thing with the youth from the school is that they make the prints, they make a small edition. I ask them to make 5 that are essentially the same. They get 8 pieces of paper, and if they can do 5, they're the winners. What they have to do then is price their work, then they have to hang their work, then we have an opening reception, and if they sell, they get 100% of the funding. Okay? So it was up to them to, printmaking is a discipline. Printmaking, you have to be disciplined and know what you're doing and be very careful and very fastidious. So the first young group, the girls were wonderful. They did 5, perfect ones, no problem. Okay? One young man, did 1. And I started walking outside, and where are you going? I don't feel like doing it anymore. Okay, fine. It's your prerogative, not a problem. So we had the exhibition. All the prints sold out. The next day, the students came, and the young ladies got, I think it was $10 a piece. It was fairly cheap. But she had $50. He had $30, and he only had 10. He went, I said, you would have spent 20 minutes doing 4 more prints, you would have had $50 because they would have sold out. Okay? So I think that was a good lesson learned. I think he learned. So this started in 2015. This is a young lady, Shandine Horton, who did this print. This is one of the first prints she did. Very complex lino cut. And it got to the stage where we showed them to a bunch of people from Portland. And they said, how much? I said, I don't know. She hasn't set a price. As soon as she sets a price, I'll buy one. Who's this other print? Oh, that's hers as well. I'll buy that as well. So we'd pre-sold, actually a friend bought 2, and we'd pre-sold 4. So when we had the opening reception, Shandine walks in, and I don't know if you can notice on there, but right here, some green dots. There are all these green dots, indicated that we'd sold prints. And she walked out of there with $350. She was a pretty happy camper. But they are doing amazing work. And this is Jim Lavador, our founder, with Pete Chalaki and Frances, his sister. And Pete ended up going to Institute of American Indian Art. And it was just so good to see and so challenging to work with them and to see them move on. That was the big thing. So one of our first major exhibitions, this is where we had been working for a while. I'd been working with resident artists and pulling their editions and pulling their prints. By this time, we'd built up quite a permanent collection. So one of the first exhibitions was in Coos Bay, called Continuous, can't even read it, Creative Continuum. It's been a long time, folks. It's been a lot of water under the bridge in the last 16 years. What we did, we married their prints from their permanent collection, and these were prints from the late 50s, early 60s, maybe early 70s at the most. Major artists, James Rosenquist, I can think of one, Shigoya, a bunch of other, and we combed their collection and they combed ours, and we married the two together. So we had something like 70 to 75 prints in the main gallery. They also showed Stories of the Living Land, the previous young student work. And they also showed the Myth of Creation project here again, which I will talk about in the second half. It was a major show and very, 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 very successful. And from that, we actually sold prints. So this is how it works. We do the exhibition. Our permanent collection is framed. It's loaned out to museums, it's loaned out to galleries, and from that, somebody says, do you have one of those prints for sale? And we say, yeah, back in our flat files, and we'll sell them a print. So that's how a lot of our funding comes. A lot of other major exhibitions happened very shortly after that. These are not in order, but we got to send 18 prints to the Gustav Heiss Center, which is part of the National Museum of the American Indian, the Smithsonian group. It then traveled to the National Museum of the American Indian in Washington, D.C. We had a show in C.N. Gorman Museum, U.S. Davis in California, Schneider Museum in Ashland, a huge show at MOCNA, which is the Museum of Contemporary Native Art in Santa Fe, which then traveled to Missoula Art Museum, a major exhibition at the Eiteljorg Museum in Indianapolis, and multiple smaller venues around Oregon, Washington, Montana. Also the Fred Jones Jr. Museum at the University of Oklahoma. And Heather Attone will be talking on Saturday afternoon at 1 o'clock. She is the Associate Curator of Native American and Non-Western Art at that museum. And she is also one of the co-authors of the book that you just saw the cover of. So this was a pretty big deal for us, for this little venue in the middle of nowhere, like some people like to say, because it's very quiet there. So when you get artists coming from New York and things like that, they think it's totally surreal. It's like, birds? Those are birds? You know, they just don't, but they love it. They get to hang out there, and it's been pretty amazing. So this is Washington, D.C. Another ongoing event that we've had was this is the first PNCA 4-day workshop. And we started this back in 2007, and it was done through the continuing education of Pacific Northwest College of Art. They set it up, they did all the registration, they just sent the participants out to us, and we get paid per participant. The first teacher was Stephen Hayes, a painter and printmaker. And then after that, I actually taught the workshop for the last 10 years now, and it's been so successful, it's always been filled up. They come for 4 days, they do monotypes, they have access to the studio 24/7. Somebody responsible has the key. I don't know of any other workshop that allows that, but it has been an absolutely wonderful program, and so popular that this past year we actually did a second workshop. So I was doing back-to-back workshops, 4 days, and then next weekend as well. So it's been pretty amazing because it's a form of us obtaining revenue. Then in 2006, one of the things we did was the first monathon. I should go back. 2006 was actually, I was going to mention that that was our first Crociato biannual at Halley Ford. They have been so supportive of us. They gave us our first biannual. They did purchase some prints, and then after that, they became our archivists. So they get one print from every edition and every series of monotypes and monoprints that we make. It is archived there. They put it online. It's there for research, for students, for whoever wants to look at it. We can't thank them enough. So what they did, Rebecca Dopkins was the key instigator of this. She has a strong connection with the people in New Zealand, especially the Maori culture. She got us to have an exhibition in a city just outside of Wellington, New Zealand in 2008. And they wanted a delegation from Crociato to go there. Well, flying to New Zealand is not cheap. They wanted me to go. They wanted an emerging artist. They wanted a mid-career artist. They also wanted an established artist. They wanted a couple of board members, and Rebecca Dopkins was coming as well. And so we had to raise funds. How do you raise funds? We're trying to, try to scramble sponsorships, grants, whatever it took. But it was getting down to the deadline, and I said, okay, we're going to hold a monathon. So this is the first monathon that we did, and they said, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to invite 84 artists to print Friday, Saturday, and Sunday morning. Where are you going to put them all? 12 artists, 3 hours at a time. So it was all scheduled so the artists could come, and you didn't have to know a thing about printmaking. So we had people off the street. We had people, major artists like Jim Lavador, Joe Feddersen, Lillian Pitt, various other people. They would make prints for those 3 hour period. They would sign them. We'd pin them on the wall. And this first year was just absolutely phenomenal because we said the goal was to get to New Zealand. So it was a goal to shoot for. So we started, and it was just this hive of activity. It was just crazy. And then we only allowed the public to come in on Sunday afternoon at 12 noon. And I looked in the studio at about 11:15, and the place was 3/4 full. I looked at 11:30, and it was like packed, and people were standing there with their checkbooks. They were looking at the Lavadors. They were looking at, because the print sizes were this. There was what we call a quarter sheet, which is only 11 by 15, which we call a small print. Then there's a half sheet, which is 22 by 15. And the first one went for $100. The second one went for $200. Well, I worked with Jim and did 12 prints, and they were sold out so fast it wasn't even funny. Anyway, by that afternoon, we had sold $16,000 worth of prints. It was in November, and it was Christmas time, and people were shopping for their friends for Christmas. It was ideal. It was fantastic. By the end of the week, following week, we had $21,000. We could get to New Zealand. It was a lot of hard work, but it was worth it, because when we went to New Zealand, this is a group doing some of the monotypes, and the artists loved it because they could be free, do whatever they want to, as many as they want to. They didn't have to clean up. We had a cleaning crew, and it was all registered for them, and we had press assistants to run through the press, and it was amazing. And then on Sunday afternoon, we allowed the public to come through to see what the process was all about. Okay? So it was pretty hectic. So we got to Patika Museum in New Zealand, and this is a Maori-run museum, and we had an exhibition of 42 prints. We had 3 rooms, plus there was an exhibition of prints from the Aboriginal artists from Australia and Samoan artists. And what was really interesting is that Print Exchange, if you remember the Stories of the Living Land, one of the Aboriginal artists was Jake Sawardi. The museum had flown Jake and his friend over for this exhibition, and that's why I got to meet him. So this big round circle of, he contributed a print to Stories of the Living Land, we got to meet him, and it was pretty incredible. And that's upside down, or sideways, sorry about that. No idea how that happened. But this is Marty Vrede and his assistant, and they even had us make paper. Now the paper that they make is made out of flax, and it's very fibrous plant that grows everywhere in New Zealand, but they can make a sheet of paper, dry it in one day, and work with it. And you can take it like cloth and crumple it and open it up again, and it's not wrinkled. Very amazing stuff. So one of the other things that we really had a good time with was the College of the Redwoods Hoopa campus in Northern California came to us in 2008, said, we have some students that want to do some printmaking. So that's fine. So they came, they had 6 students, a couple of teachers. They spent 10 hours driving all the way to Crow Shadow on the Thursday. They camped on the studio floor, and we started printmaking on Friday. They printmade Friday, Saturday, and Sunday morning, and then they turned around and left to drive down to California. But they were so hooked, they said, this is so exciting that, in fact, some of the artists actually sold their prints and actually got to go to got invited to a show, working with other more mature artists, and sold prints there as well. Very life-affirming for them. So they saved up money by selling calendars and posters and came back in 2011. And then in, 2010, I do apologize. Then I said, what if we come down to your campus in 2011? Which we did. We took a young artist from our tribe, and my wife and I drove down, and we had this old hall. It was an old church, deconsecrated church hall, and we had 37 artists come through in 2.5 days. One as young as 14, and her grandfather who was 84. They had a blast, and it was 107 degrees in that hall. But we made prints, and they were so excited. They even do this. I mean, even the kid was getting involved, and he was just great. They were absolutely fantastic. So then the Ford family, and this is a group of them, and this is only a small press that we do have that's portable, and they came back again because this is the Ray Trail press. This press was made in Portland by a gentleman named Ray Trail. He designed it for artists, and he would make it for the cost of materials only, but he would design it to your specifications. And this is the first press that Crow Shadow had bought. But the Ford Family Foundation said we had to get this big press. Well, we don't have room for all the presses. What do we do with the Ray Trail press? We end up selling it to the Hoopa Reservation. And because of that sale, the tribe there gave them a building, and they started an art center around that press. And the students took ownership of it, and they ran with it, which was kind of a nice, we're like their technical support, but unfortunately they're too far away for us to go there on a regular basis. So, other events, we've been to the Portland Print Fair 3 times, done very well. We are going, last year in 2016, we went to the Editions and Artist Book Fair in New York, and we'll be going again this November. So what does the 25th anniversary bring us? We have this major retrospective at Hallie Ford. We have the book available at Hallie Ford. That exhibition will travel to the Watkin Museum, Bellingham, and then to the Jordan Schnitzer Museum of Art in Pullman, Washington. I don't know whether you're aware, we also just finished winning the Governor Arts Award, okay, which will be given to us, I believe, October the 6th in Portland. So what does the future hold? The future hold is yeah, I'm leaving, and it's kind of a sad thing, but it's going to move on because we have this excellent executive director, Carl Davis. He was hired in 2014. And then Nika Blasser, was hired in 2015 as our marketing director. Print sales now account for about 40% of our operating revenue, which we've come a long way from 2001 when we first started doing a lot of editions, where, you know, we might sell a few here and a few there and rely the rest on grants and things like that. But it's been a great growth. It's been absolutely fantastic. And what the future is going to hold is going to be up to these people and then the person who's going to take my place. We're looking at the possibility of future premises, either building a new building or acquiring some premises, but Jim wants to keep it on the reservation. We think we are the only reservation-based fine art print studio in the country, which is a pretty important distinction. That's about it for now. Any questions? One of the things that I find is that I can end up talking for a long time, so I'm cognizant of the minutes that I'm allowed. Any questions at all? But you can find, you know, I've only given a brief overlook about Crow's Shadow. If you look at the book, there's an in-depth article by Prudence Roberts, which gives a really good inkling of how it all started, where it all came from, and the stuff that we've been through. So. Done? Oh.
This is Deanna. How do you get the kids started? I mean, because there's so much to art, you know, like composition and values and all that kind of stuff. So how do you get them started with this printmaking process?
That's an excellent question, because I am not a teacher. I've never been trained as a teacher. I fell into teaching just because I love printmaking. And so basically I'm teaching technique. I know nothing about color theory, period. I was never taught color theory. So teaching per se is a whole different ballgame. So I just kind of say, okay, this is how we tear paper. This is how we register paper. This is what we've got to work with. You come up with a composition. I don't care what composition you come up with. That, to me, it doesn't matter, because these kids, I call them, everybody's a kid. These people, they come up with their own things, and it's pretty amazing. So it's teaching them the discipline of inking the plate up and printing it and trying to get an edition that is essentially the same. I have to really admit that it's more technique than actually teaching composition and color theory and all that stuff. I just don't do it. But the new teacher, and I'll talk about her later on, the new master printer is taking over. She is a teacher. So she's got them into color theory already, which is great. I think it's fantastic.
Hi. Oh, goodness, that's loud. This is Anne. I'm over here.
Oh, sorry.
Is Crow's Shadow open to the public on a regular basis?
Absolutely. I'm there from 8:30 to 5. There's usually somebody there, yes. And if you happen to come on the weekend, if you call us ahead of time and ask nicely enough, somebody may open up for you on the weekend. I would, even though I live 24 miles away.
And are there things that non-Native Americans can participate in, workshops and things?
Yes, that's
like
an
that?
excellent question. I failed to mention that. Most of the workshops that are run by Native American master weavers or master beaters and stuff like that, in most cases, up to them whether it's open to a non-Native person. In most cases, 99% of the cases, it's wide open. There's just the odd one that they want to keep the culture to themselves, and then it's based on that criteria. But no, they're usually pretty open, very flexible.
Frank, it's Sharon.
Yeah, sure.
Can you talk a little bit about what the rest of your time here in Salem is going to be at Hallie Ford?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no. Let's see. The rest of our time in Salem. Well, I've got an artist coming tomorrow. He's the last artist I work with. He's Navajo, Dene Yahtzee, and he's on his way to San Francisco, and we're trying to get him to sign his 2 editions of prints that we just finished doing, because we want to take one of the prints and frame it to go to New York. He said, well, I'm on my way to San Francisco. I'll be coming through Salem on Friday. Can we do it there? So Jonathan Bucci very kindly has lent us some space, and Demian will be coming there to sign prints. And then Friday night, that's tomorrow night, I guess already, we'll have a big opening reception at Hallie Ford. It could be crowded. People said it's for members only, and I think it's open to the public. I don't think it's a big problem. You were supposed to RSVP, but just show up. If you don't get a chance to see it tomorrow night, see the exhibition. There are 75 prints in the exhibition, and that is only a small portion of our permanent collection. I was telling Sharon we have something like, I think the last ones with Demian's, is about 234 prints that we have in our permanent collection, which is a lot of editions, a lot of series. Now, they're not all done by, I've worked with about 60 artists over the past 16 years, and some of them multiple times. And again, I'll talk more about the artists in the second half. So, yeah, and then on Saturday, Heather Atone will be talking at 1 o'clock, and this is in the Law Building, I believe, Paulson Law Building, room 201, talking about Indigenous printmaking and how Crow Shadow fits into that whole lineage. And it goes back quite a ways. It's not new. And then there will be a panel discussion at 2:15 featuring James Lavador, myself, Carl Davis, the executive director, and Marie Watt, our poster child. She's a major artist now, but she was an emerging artist when we first met her in 2001. That's what's going to happen. And it's back to work on Monday, big time, because I have a 4-day workshop to get ready for on the weekend. Yes?
My name is Bob, and my question relates generally to printmaking. Who determines the number of prints that can be printed from a single plate, and what criteria do they use in determining that number?
Okay, excellent. It's a choice. It depends on the complexity of the plate, sometimes. Depends on the artist's stature in the art world. You know, you pull a James Lavador, I mean, he's pretty up there. You know, we've done editions of 30 for him. Usually our editions are anywhere from 12 to 16 to 20. The average is about 16. And we just sort of, between Carl Davis and myself and the marketing director and the artist, we determine, yeah, you know, it's a guesstimate. It's a guess as to how many you might want to pull. We don't pull hundreds. Back in the 80s, they used to pull 200-300 prints, editions. And they've still got them sitting in their drawers. What's the point? We would rather have the editions sell out. Like Marie Watt would do editions of 20, and they would sell out. If they sell out, we'd bring that artist back again. But we've also got prints that were sitting that have never sold one. There's a chance as the publishers that we take. What was the second part of the question? Was the price? Well, maybe it wasn't, but I'll throw it out there anyway. The price is something important because here again, it really depends on the stature of the artist. If it's an emerging artist, no, the prices are much lower. And the idea is to market those prints as fast as possible so that A, the publication costs are paid down and the artist starts receiving remuneration because we're here to help the artist. How that works is that, okay, I'm expanding into time here, but when we act as the publishers, we determine the size of the edition, we decide on the price. Then we do the edition when the artist is gone. So we have the edition, where we say the prints are essentially the same. They're not exactly the same because I'm human, I think. Okay, I'm not a computer. These are fine art, hand-pulled prints, so there's a big difference to pressing a button. The fortunate part is I get what they call the BAT, the Bon et Terre. That's what you match the rest of the edition to. That's my property. My press assistant gets a printer's proof. The artist gets a series of artist proofs, usually 10% of the edition size. Okay, that's usually constitutes 2 or 3 prints. Then Crow Shadow keeps 2. They're all essentially the same as the edition. They're called Crow Shadow Press Impression Number 1, CSPI 1, and CSPI 2. Number 1 becomes part of our permanent collection, which I frame and we box, and it's meant for shows at such as Hallie Ford or anywhere else. We've got a whole system to send them out to various galleries, etc. CSBI2 is housed at the Hallie-Ford Museum of Art. Now, when we work with an artist, I keep track of the publication costs. So we control the edition as we market the edition through through galleries, museums, whatever. We pay down the publication costs first. As soon as the publication costs are met, we share the proceeds 50-50 with the artist immediately. So they get a check like right now. So here again, it depends on the stature of artists. If it's an emerging artist, it may take longer to pay down those publication costs. If you're a major artist, sell 3 prints and we start paying them. That's how that works. I know we're running.
I'm Peter.
Sorry.
This is Peter. Do you know the incidence of color blindness among Native American males? And does color blindness discourage involvement in printmaking?
Boy, that's a heavy question. I honestly don't know, sir. I've never run across that. With the people that I've worked with, there seems to be no problem whatsoever, so I'll have to talk about it with somebody on that one. I don't know, very honestly.
Sure. Yeah, my name is David. Multicolor prints, are they done frequently, and how hard is that?
We'll probably get more on that in the second half, but it really depends. And yeah, I'll leave that one to the second half to some degree. It really depends on the complexity. Yeah, some of them been harder than others. I mean, I've done 18 colors, okay? And I won't say any more about that because there's a story behind that one. You know, some as simple as 1 color, you know, some 6 colors, 8 colors. Then it depends on the size. It depends on the equipment we've got to work with. So we can do really large prints, size-wise up to 30 by 40, but depending on the colors, yeah, it's really up to the individual artist. If an artist wants to do 18 colors, we do 18 colors. But it takes longer and the publication costs are more, that's all. It's just a lot of hard work sometimes.
Oh, I see one more.
Down here. Yeah, there's.
I was a printer for journeyman printing for 25 years, but not the kind of printing you're talking about. We had letterpress,
You're right.
we had offset,
All right.
we had all kinds of things, but not yours.
No.
We'd print 5x8 postcards on a sheet, 50, what was it, 50 by, you know,
Big.
Yeah, big.
Big.
About, like 100 of them,
Yeah.
of many, many colors.
Yeah.
So that's not art printing, right?
Well,
By the way, it was good enough for Ansel Adams. We printed his black and white book.
ooh, awesome. Awesome.
H.S. Crocker's, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a different thing. I mean, we can print off, like I showed you that limestone that was donated to us. That's how lithography was invented. So these are fine art hand-pulled prints, either off stone or aluminum plate or a photo plate or lino cut, wood cut, even silkscreen. I don't do silkscreen myself. We have a small studio, but it's only very small, so it's not what I work with the artist with. It's primarily lithography. Yeah, yeah.
Jeanette, and this is kind of a logistics question. Well, it is. I mean, are there places to stay if we come visit your...
Well, there's lots of places in Pendleton. That's not a problem. When the artists come, we actually have a little room off the studio. It's called it's like a hermit cell. There are no windows. They love it, and it's totally quiet. And it's very quiet, sometimes too quiet for people. But that's where the artists stay if they come for a 2-week residency. And this workshop coming up of a lady who will be staying there herself, and she'll be in charge of the key, and they have access to the studio 24/7 for 4 days. They love it. But people who want to visit, yeah, lots of places in Pendleton, not a problem. Oh yeah,
Thank you.
a lot of hotels, motels. Do we take a break now or keep going?
Yes, I think it's time for a break.
I think so.
10 minutes?
Let's get going. Well, this is my bailiwick. The second half, this is where I've really enjoyed myself over the last 16 years. I want to talk about what does it mean and what is it like to be a collaborative printmaker. What is a collaborative printmaker? Bit of backstory here. I'll try to keep this brief. This is my story. I was a finishing carpenter in construction for the longest time, plus various other careers and jobs. But at age 47, one sort of gets a midlife crisis, and instead of buying a Harley Davidson, somebody talked me to going back to university. I'd been to the University of British Columbia in 1963 and 1964. Then I went traveling in Europe, met my wife, got married, and had 2.5 kids. No, we went to Australia first. Anyway, all that. So I was in finishing in construction and getting dissatisfied and vowed I needed to do something else. I did not want to be nailing on baseboard at age 60, and I beat it. So I went back to the University of Victoria. They accepted my credits from 27 years previous from the University of British Columbia, which is awesome. I did not need a portfolio. That we were the last year we did not need a portfolio, artist portfolio, to get in. So I could take visual arts. I knew nothing about printmaking, period. Intaglio, what's that? No idea. Sculpture, I'd done some painting, but I was busy working, raising kids. So I went back, and 5 years later, going part-time, hanging garage doors to pay for my tuition, I graduated with a BFA with honors in printmaking. And I applied to the Tamarind Institute in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And not knowing really what it was about, but I wanted to do my printmaking better because they were the figureheads for reintroducing lithography into the U.S. So it was June Wayne who started the Tamarind Institute in L.A., and then there was Tanya Grossman on Long Island, who got all the big name artists, Robert Rauschenberg and Jasper Johns and all that, to get into printmaking. Tamarind Institute only takes 8 students from around the world. Okay, I applied, I got in. Then I found out after 3 weeks that only 1 or 2 would go to the professional side, the rest would go home. It's very intense, and you learn about collaboration, working with artists to bring their visions and their creativity into form of a print, lithographic print. So I did manage to get into the second year. There were 3 of us at that time because they were really, really busy in the contract section. And here I am. Heard about the job at Crow Shadow. This is before I even was on the internet, and a friend of mine pointed this out to me, and they said they wanted a Tamarind trained printer. Anybody who does the first year at Tamarind is Tamarind trained. They don't have to get in the second year. They have enough knowledge to be able to do anything. I happen to be a Tamarind master printer, which gives you guys a bit of a step up. So that was the advantage of getting hired at Crow Shadow. They said, Tamarind master printer, you're hired, basically. So this on the screen is Edgar Heap of Birds. If you remember back at the Conduit to the Mainstream Symposium, we had all these major artists. They asked me, Crow Shadow asked me if I would work with one of the artists. They could stay over for a few days. The symposium was from Friday through to Sunday, and the artist was supposed to stay another 2 days for me to do a print. And sure, no problems at all. I'll work with anybody. It took a while to see what he wanted to do, and on Monday afternoon, he said, this is what I want you to do. And I went, literally like that. That's an 18-color lithograph. So we didn't have a lot of things. We didn't have aluminum plates for him to draw on. We didn't have much paper. So luckily, one of our board members was a printmaking teacher at Whitman College in Walla Walla. So she got me plates. Edgar drew the plates, we started mixing colors, and then 9/11 happened. To say it was stressful was saying a lot. It was pretty incredible. He ended up staying till Saturday when he could fly out again, but we never even got the approval to print done. What we do is, when I work with an artist, we do a series of color trial proofs. So you can change and mix colors and do whatever it needs to take to get the final print looking really good. And then they would go away, and then I'd print the edition according to that. Well, I broke this down to 12 plates, and we never got the approval to print by the time he left, so we had to do it long distance. But he finally decided on this version he wanted, and we managed to print it. But it took a long. I trained 5 spongers. These are press assistants that have to keep the stone damp. Very briefly, people were asking about lithography, how it's done. When you saw the big, how do you print off of stone? The way it was invented in 1798 by a German fellow who happened to live next door to a quarry that quarried the best limestone in the world. He was a playwright, and he wanted to disseminate his plays faster. The only known method was the Gutenberg press, which is laborious and slow. So he invented chemical printing. You grind the stone very smooth, use a greasy substance, greasy crayon like a China marker or something, and now we have specialized tools, but you draw on the stone. The stone molecule and the grease molecule want to bond. Okay? So it's all molecular, it's all flat, it's all planographic. Then he brought into another substance called gum arabic. Gum arabic comes from the acacia tree in North Africa, and it's organic, it's edible. They use it in Mideast for cooking. It's slightly acidic, but once it's dry, no solvent on earth will dissolve it, period. I go like that, it's dissolved. Water only, okay? This is the secret, because what we do is after the artist is drawn on the stone with the greasy substance, I use a mixture of gum arabic and nitric acid that I can stir with my finger, and we give it an etch. We don't incise in the stone, it's all a molecular bonding. The gum arabic molecule and the stone molecule love each other as well. But gum arabic is water loving. So this is why when we say we have spongers sponge a stone, they sponge a stone with just the right surface of water, keeping the negative areas, the blank areas, damp, because the gum arabic is attracting the water. You take your greasy roller, your greasy ink, roll it across the stone, sticks to the drawn area but not the non-image area. That's the essential part of lithography. In actual fact, it's 21 steps from the drawing to the processing to the printing. So it's very laborious, but it's exciting. That's the essence of it. So this is the first print that we did. This is the first one that first artist I worked with, and over the 16 years, I've collaborated with at least 60 artists, some of them multiple times. So then, I talked earlier on about the Myth of Creation project. This is Philip John Charette. He's Yupik. He's from Alaska, but he lived in in Baker City at the time. And the Myth of Creation project was started by Eileen Foti out of Rutgers Innovative Print and Paper, and Kim Berman out of South Africa. She had artist-proof studios in Johannesburg, South Africa, in fact, in Soweto, in the townships, teaching young artists to either be an artist in a lithograph or to actually become printmakers. And initially it was designed, and she introduced this project to us at the symposium, and initially Australia was supposed to be involved. There was a gentleman in Sydney, Australia, that was supposed to work with 5 elderly Aboriginal ladies to do this Myth of Creation. It's based on the creation myth stories. Well, like I said, 9/11 happened, and it just became this nightmare, so the project took a bit longer. Well, when Eileen Foti went to South Africa to pick up the prints from there that were supposed to be done, the South African contingent consisted of the San artists, the Bushmen of the Kalahari Desert. They lived 700 miles away in Botswana, in the Kalahari Desert. They traveled to Johannesburg to tell their stories and to draw the stones and plates. When she got there, she found out that most of them hadn't been printed yet. We're doing editions of 57. Okay? So she spent her whole 2 weeks just printing. Then she found out that the Australian contingent, the gentleman went walkabout. Didn't heard about him. So it became a 2-country exchange. And so the edition size we narrowed down to 50, and I worked with 5 artists locally, and they worked with their sound artists. And this is Philip doing his first print ever. And when I talked about color trial proofing, this is a color trial proof. He decided to print the red first and then the black on top. Didn't like it, it didn't work, so that's what we come up with. Okay? He's a mask maker, amazing mask maker. So he translated that mask situation, and that's actually a photograph of himself dancing in a Yupik mask. And these masks are suspended from the ceiling, and they dance like this. Very amazing, incredible amazing. So the other artist, Ellen Taylor, and this is the print that she did. And when the South Africans saw this, they said, "Ah, Picasso." I call it Cubist Coyote. It was great. She did it very quickly. And because we were in time constraints, I tried to limit them to 2 colors because I had to print all 50, each one. Jeremy Red Star Wolf, the first is a reminder, is at his opening reception. After he'd done this project with Myth of Creation, which was this. This is actually 2 colors, and there's just a bit of orange in the sun and a bit of orange in the eyes. And here again, the South Africans thought this was a very powerful image. But Jeremy did a residency with me later on, and he did a series of 4 editions and a number of monotypes, monoprints. And at the opening reception, first reception he ever had, he sold 16 prints, which was fairly amazing for an emerging artist. These are some of the San artists' prints. And I haven't shown them all because it would just take too much time. Very simple, but they all had a story. The other component of the portfolio was that they told their stories, and they silk-screened these stories on handmade corn husk paper. So there's 6 stories in total, but 10 lithographs. And this is how man made fire. So about the second artist I work with is Truman Lowe. And Truman Lowe at that time, here again, he was at the symposium. He was the curator for contemporary native art at the National Museum of the American Indian as it was being built. So sculptor, printmaker, been doing it for a long time. The reason he is very important is because of his stature, but at the symposium was Marie Watt. And Sharon just reminded me, Marie Watt is an alumni of Willamette University. She's our poster child. She self-describes her as that. She says, if it wasn't for Crow Shadow, I would not be where I am in the art world today. That is amazing. Her and Truman connected, and Truman was doing an exhibition at the Gustav High Center in New York, and he paired 2 artists for the same exhibition. He paired Marie Watt, who was emerging, still teaching, with Jean Quick-to-See Smith, who is a major artist in printmaking and painting. So here's Marie with her first 4 editions, and Maria's on the left, and then that was my press assistant, Becca, at the time. She was a student at Whitman, and they would come for 5 weeks in the summer just to assist me. She was great. But these 4 prints sold out so fast it wasn't even funny. And so Marie, I've had the pleasure of working with her 4 times. We've done 16 editions, 12 are sold out. And she kept her prices reasonably low. We kept raising them every now and then after the first one sold out. And because I'm retiring, she's coming to print one more time in October. So it's like bookending my career, if you will. Yeah, she's, I have no idea what she's going to do, but she'll be exciting. This is me working with James Lavador, our founder, and amazing artist. He not a printmaker, like, as I said, he's a painter, but loves the idea of printmaking. One of the first projects that we did, the first major edition we did, we tried all these different color trial proofs, and they're 4 separate editions. And he likes his paintings. He likes to panel them like that, right, in certain different configurations. He wanted to do the same with the print, but unfortunately, it just wasn't coming together. We tried different color trial proofs. It wasn't coming together. So I had him up on the board. So one night he says, "Can I draw on them?" Yeah, why not? Next morning they were up there, and I went, "Wow." So after I printed the edition, so they're each at least 2 colors, I laid them out onto the gallery floor, or he would, I'd finish the edition, the ink was dry, he would take them up to the studio and draw individually on each one. Not all the same, all different. Then when he finished all 4 editions, we laid them on the gallery floor. I left on Friday night. I said, "Okay, you put them in the combination you want." So he did that, had them all ready for me Monday morning, and that's how we presented. It's called a variable edition, VE, because each drawing is different. The basis, the lithographic component is all the same, but the drawings are all different. So when clients come to purchase this print, I've had people take about 2 to 4 hours just to pick the print that they wanted. But they were going for, I believe, this is called Ghost Cam, for about $1,200, which is pretty inexpensive for a James Lavador. So that was one of the projects. And then he came along this year, and we've done various projects before that. Oh, by the way, I should say that all the prints that he makes, he donates to Crociato 100%. He doesn't want any money from it whatsoever, okay? So back in 2004, 2005, he did a series of 8 small lithographs, 2 colors, in editions of 50. So that's 50 times 8 that we had to print. And we sold them for $100 a piece as a fundraiser. Set of 8 went for 10% off. They were gone in less than a year. And then he did that again a couple of years ago, and the image was a bit bigger, but the print size was the same, and they went for $200 a piece, and they're all sold out again. But he says, "Well, for our final project," he says, "how big can we go?" Oh, thanks, Jim. Doesn't look like much. Each image is 30 inches high by 40 inches wide, okay? So these are very solid colors, very solid flats. People say, "Well, it'd be far easier to silk screen them." Well, we don't have the equipment for that. So just to give you an idea, the blue of the sky on the top one actually covers right underneath the green as well. So that's a whole section of green. And my roller is only approximately 25 inches wide by 10 3/4 inch diameter, which gives me what we call a rollout. The circumference of the roller only 33 inches, but that's 40 inches. So I get roller marks. So normally when you do a print, you want the equipment to be bigger than your image size, so you can go 4 times from the inking slab to the plate, and it covers the whole image. We had to go 10 times for each color. So yeah, major production. So this is the last print that I'll have printed with him, but they're only sold as a set. And if you've got a spare $8,500 and a big wall. We also worked internationally. Keiko O'Hara was the printmaking teacher at Whitman College, and they had this gentleman, Zhang Yunling from China. He's Naxi, N-A-X-I, or Naxi, and from a small minority group in China, and he was there to teach Donghua painting to a class. He spoke no English. His only one word in English was Walmart. Because he loved tools. Loved tools. Oh man, he went through my whole shop. He's even got one of my little brayers. I'll take this. Okay. We had 6 days. He said, "Well, he should do a print." Okay, we'll do a print. So I showed him that big stone you saw on the press. Loved it. He'd never printed off stone before because they primarily do woodcuts. And so I'm thinking of a simple 1-2 color print, no problems at all. What size paper do you want? Took a piece of Japanese paper, folded in half, he said, "This size." He did 2 images on 1 stone. Each image was 6 colors. Not only that, in lithography you usually print light to dark. In China they print dark to light. The challenges were interesting over 6 days, and these are editions of 20. I haven't shown you the other print, but this one is important because it is it is the only living pictographic language in the world. The priests have kept this alive over all these years in China. And they do scrolls 100 feet long telling a story. And what this reads, and along with that, is this symbolism. And he's got it translated from the Dongba to the Mandarin, which is the standard language in China, and to the English. And so it's for all people under heaven, may trees grow gracefully on the mountains. May spring water fill up the lakes. May we have peace and friendship. May we enjoy longevity and abundance. Yeah, very important. So that was an interesting challenge, to say the least. One of my favorite artists as well was Joe Feddersen. And here again, Joe, when he first arrived, he looked at me. He's a major printmaker, major painter, printmaker primarily. And he looked at me and, what's the biggest print you can make, Frank? So like a fool, I went over to the press and measured it. Oh, I can do 30 by 40, Joe. Good, that's what we'll do. Why? Because I don't have a press big enough. So Wyatt View, which was created, and I don't have an image of it here, but it is over at Halley Ford. You must see it. It's 30 by 40, 6 colors. A major undertaking. And this is what we have to do when you're with a collaborative printmaker, is roll with the artist, try to fill their desires of what they want to do and what they want to create. And here's Joe working with a young lady, Tara Burnside, and he would actually have members of the community come in and work on his monotypes. He was working on the monotypes himself while I was using the big roller to print his edition, or to print his color trial proofs, and he'd have them create these designs and make monotypes and have them sign them, and they could take them home. Very generous. Well, that's only a small image. That's amazing. One of the favorite artists I've ever worked with was Rick Bartow. Many of you probably know of him. I had the privilege of working with him 3 times. He worked at Gros Shadow 4 times. He was with Eileen Foti the year I was hired, just before I was hired. And I'm honored, and it was a privilege to work with him. And here he is working on one of his first series of prints. These are called monoprints. What's the difference between a monotype and a monoprint? A monotype is where you ink up, paint on, either with a roller or brushes on a flat surface, manipulate the ink, print that. You might have residue left over, which you then print as a ghost, or you could add to that residue and print that again, and then go through the press multiple times. It is still a monotype because there's not one element that is in the same position. Monoprint is, we created this lithographic plate. He would do this drawing on Mylar. I would expose it onto a photographic plate. So it's versed, so when you print it, it comes out the way you wanted to see it. Then I would take the Mylar and put it on the back, in reverse, on the back of this piece of plexi. Then he would paint into the plexi, adding inks, and come up with this print, and then would print it. This is the first one he did this series, and he says, nah, not going to do that again. In other words, he wasn't going to paint every little stripe on each one because the series size was like 16. So I would end up, the subsequent ones, I would roll them up, and then he would take away and make his marks. And this particular drawing, he says, yeah, I looked at me, he says, it started out as a bear. It's based on his uncle who went to a lot of powwows. Then the other thing, and this was daunting, this was absolutely terrifying for me because I was still new there. When Rick was there doing his residency, apparently him and Jim Lavador always got together and did a series of monotypes and with drawings or whatever as a collaborative project. And so here I had Rick Bartow in the studio as well as Jim Lavador, so 2 major artists. And the idea was somebody would start a monotype. These are half sheet, 15 by 22. The other artists would respond to it right away, and then then it could go back to the other artist again, and they could respond to it again. So in this case, Jim started the background colors. Rick would add the animals or trees or whatever he wanted to do, and then he would allow Jim to draw back into that again. So this is actually 3 times through the press. Then I suggested, and Jim kept doing the background colors. I said to Rick, I said, why don't you do the background colors and let Jim do one, and then you respond to that. So Rick started sitting there working and got very serious. He says, I can't do landscapes. Here, Jim, you do it. And Jim did the subsequent landscapes, and they responded. But those 6 prints sold out so fast because you're dealing with major artists. This one I like to talk about. This is the last series we worked on in 2013. And it was a hectic 4.5 days. We did 4 series, a total of 75 monoprints in 4.5 days. So in other words, he drew the image. There's 4 separate images. He would draw the image. He took 2.5 hours to draw 4 separate images. We'd shoot it on the photo plate, and then we started printing the background colors one day and then print the key plate the next day. So that makes it a monoprint. So he had us working, and literally we were rolling up the key plate, bringing the print over to him at the table, and he'd go, draw, 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 stamp, 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 next! Okay, and we're still going like this with the big roller. And he had them all signed, sealed, done, just like that. Well, Bird Hat was the last series that we were doing, and we did it. We printed the background colors. And then we went to the press the next day to print the key plate. And I pulled the first print off, and I was very excited. And then my stomach dropped to my feet. I had put the drawn Mylar the correct way around on the back of the plate. I should have reversed it. Okay? It came out backwards. Okay? Hence, when you see the bird and you see the shadows where he laboriously took that out, I'd messed up. I had messed up, and I felt sick. A lot of artists would have said, well, we got to do that over again or whatever, right? But most of the artists I've worked with have been pretty kind and generous. He looked at it and he says, I can fix that. Not a problem. Because the eyes are important to him. If you look at his birds, the eyes are the most important part, also the top of the head. And I think this is a self-portrait, but he fixed it. Then he looked at me and says, there are no mistakes in art, Frank. Think about that. I tell it to all the students, anybody I work with, there are no mistakes. You just run with it. And this is an exciting one because I kind of liked it. He did all kinds of weird and wonderful things, and he looked at that and he said, I hope people don't think that it's a crow's head in a frying pan. That's the kind of sense of humor he had. I mean, he would shout at me from across the room, just to wake me up. Frank, what? Oh, just kidding. Okay. That was our friend Rick. Another international artist we worked with is Woon Jin Ho. She is from England. I don't know if I'll get too involved, but she actually called me from England one night. It was 4 o'clock our time, it was 2 o'clock in the morning their time. She wanted to know about residencies. So long story short, we invited her down, and she ended up staying with us, Marie and myself, has since become a family friend. But she is a fully fledged veterinarian, went to Cambridge for 7 years. So you got to be a doctor. She also, in that 7-year period, took 2 years to get a BFA in art history. She was only 34 when she came here. Amazing, amazing artist. And a couple of years ago, she got the commission to design the lunar coins for the Royal Mint. So we worked with well-established and these amazing artists. So this looks like a linocut, but it's actually based on a linocut turned into a lithograph. So these are the series that she did. And everybody's probably familiar with Lillian Pitt. Everybody loves Lillian Pitt. She was amazing. And that was my press assistant at the time, Julie Wallace. While I was color trial proofing Lillian's editions, she did 4. In one day, her and Julie pulled 31 monotypes. One day. Lillian was dancing. And they were pretty incredible. So what she would do, and the reason she got so many, and she's using stencils as her mark making. If you look at the really dark ones, they're the first inking. So it's a rainbow roll inked, and then Julie would crank down the pressure each time. So Lillian would change the position of the stencils, and then she'd crank down, and we're doing this on Japanese paper, so your final ones down there right in front of Julie are just these ephemeral amounts of ink and stencils on this paper, and it was pretty amazing. So here's Philip again, a little older version of Philip, signing his series of monotypes. And here he is actually, when you think of the challenge that we have to come up with, he's actually burning the edges of veneer, and then we actually glued it onto the paper. We actually had to put an acrylic base on the bottom so it's pH neutral, and then glued to his prints. So they were all glued on there, as well as paper made by my wife Marie that he had got from her in trade for a huge mask that I have. This is a very important story because he came back and did a series of 12 prints based on his masks. The series is called Medicine, and he got to take one with him. And he went down to the first year. He went down to the Santa Fe Indian Market. First year he ever got invited, and he entered the print, not this particular print, another one he had, into the jury show, and came back with blue ribbon for best of printmaking, and blue ribbon for overall division, 2D work. That was pretty amazing. So it went on from there, and then the next 2010, Rick Gendro, who was a Spokane artist, came and did 4 series of monoprints again, and he took one from this series called Quilston Man, took it to the Santa Fe market. He'd been to the Santa Fe market for 15 years, entered it into a jury show along with his paintings, came back with blue ribbon for best of printmaking and blue ribbon for best of division. He said, I made more sales that year than I have in the last 15 years. So yeah, we're pretty proud of that fact. It's pretty amazing. Another young artist, Vanessa Enos. She's been involved with Crow Shadow a lot. Basically taught herself printmaking there. So we were doing an edition of prints, and the reason she's important is because this print that she created, this lithograph, was purchased by the Library of Congress. We sold 18 prints to the Library of Congress. And including major artists such as Joe Feddersen, James Lavador, and emerging artists like Vanessa Enos. So, and Frank LaPena. Getting back to this guy, Marty Vrede, he saw him before, previously in New Zealand. He ended up getting a Fulbright travel scholarship to come to Crow Shadow to learn stone lithography better. So we got to know him more, and so we're working with all these international artists, which is amazing. This is Adnan Sharera. He's Lebanese-American, and he's from Detroit. And he came and did actually 3 editions and 11 separate series of monoprints. He kept us working for 12 days. And if you look closely at these prints, he's using Prismacolor to color all those in. So when you look at all these images, this figure flying in the air, they're all hand cut out, they're all carefully colored in with Prismacolor, which are archival. Then we come to Wendy Red Star, another one of our favorite artists, and she was we managed to find funding through the ANA, this Administration for Native Americans, a large federal grant. It was huge, and was to work with 6 various artists over a 2-year period. So Wendy was our first artist under that grant. And here we are creating her print called Rescar 1, very iconic. So what this is actually, this is a photo plate. This is an aluminum plate coated with a photosensitive emulsion. The car is a digital printout that we put onto a piece of mylar. Then we have to expose it, and at that time we did not have a large exposure unit, which the Ford Family Foundation purchased for us later on. I had to go to the sunshine. So in other words, I've got a piece of cardboard, I'm timing it, the cardboard goes back in, go back to the developing room. So that's what we had to do. But this is what we come up with. That's one of them. Very iconic, very pop, but she's based it on the car, she's Crow, and it's based on the Crow Reservation. She says, that's our signpost at the entrance to our reservation. Yeah, amazing art. So along with her, we had artists, this under the ANA grant, Frank LaPena from Northern California, loved drawing on stone, so there he is drawing very carefully on the stone. Corwin Claremont, or Corky, from Montana. Jim Denemy from Minneapolis. And John Fedorov, he's based out of Seattle, I believe. So, yeah, these are all very major artists. And, of course, James Luna. And James, took a long time to get him to Crow Shadow, but we finally got there, and he fell in love with it. And we're doing a whole series of monotypes and monoprint, mainly the monotypes, one-of-a-kind prints. And he was actually a performance artist. Has been a performance artist for 30-plus years. And he used to be a painter, but hadn't painted for a long time. But after he finished his residency, he says, I think I want to take up painting again. Okay. This is one of the prints that he did. This is called Sumo Jazz. He had a residency in Japan, and he talked himself into sumo wrestling camp, which is very rare, and had these youngsters pose with him. He's in the center, and these gentlemen on either side are teenagers. Okay? Had them pose with sacred objects, so we printed them on an archival paper and then glued them onto these various printed surfaces. The other major grant that we got was in 2011 from the Ford Family Foundation. They have been so generous to us. We were one of 4 organizations to get a Golden Spot Award. The idea of this award was to work with 6 artists over 2 years. And they are still actually continuing to fund 3 artists per year. So the first 2 years we worked with 6 artists. This is Ava Lake, and she's setting up a print that I'll show you in a second. And those 6 residencies happened. We had a major show in Portland. It was so successful. The artists were all happy. The reports go back to the Ford Family Foundation. They said, we'll fund you for another 3 artists. They've been doing that since 2013. Okay? So, major contributor. So how the ANA, the Golden Spot Award happens is that the artist gets a stipend. They spend 2 weeks. As far as I'm concerned, it's a vacation. I do all the work. I mean, we do all the work. They do the design. And what Ava came up with was this rainbow roll. And this is how I'd lay it out onto the big roller. And this is the big roller I'd be wielding. And this is how she laid it out. This is what she wanted. The overlap's exactly the same way. And that's how you'd roll out. That's the first run, or the first printing. Okay, and then this was the second printing. So some of these colors, we did 4 separate editions. Some of these colors, there were 18 strips of ink on that slab. And I had to control that over an edition. And that's what we ended up with. And they're all about 3/8 of an inch apart. That was a challenge. We were going for an edition of 12 because of the complexity of the print. Because we have to keep that blend essentially the same, so over all 12 prints, there's no shifting. When I laid them on the table, I got an edition of 14. That was a highlight. That was pretty amazing. So other artists we worked with. Okay, I talked very briefly before about publishing, how we publish an artist. We also do contract printing. We do very, very little of it. But Dale Chihuly, there was a connection somehow, and Dale Chihuly normally contracts with a shop in Portland. But he wanted to do one here, so in contract printing, what you have to do is give them a price. I've done a lot of estimating in my years in construction, etc., so I had a pretty good idea, and I had other formulas to go by. So he wanted to do this print that was 25 inches wide by 37 inches high. He would provide the paper, but he wanted an edition of 100. Okay. He wanted actually 134 good ones, so he'd have presentation proofs and others to give away, etc. we had to pull 177 pieces of paper to get that 134 good impressions. That was 3 weeks of solid printing with a big roller. So we actually came to Crow Shadow, and I taught him this new technique of using toner powder and alcohol to do drawing, which he loved. He also wanted an audience, which we had some locals attend. And this is the print that we came up with. It's called Crow Shadow Baskets. We have a bunch of black baskets in our collection, and from Joey Lavador, and he saw them. He says, "How much?" We said, "They're not for sale because they're part of our permanent collection." But he created this print because of that. It's a 6-color lithograph, and then they drew on it with acrylic paint. Okay. Here again, it's a variable edition because people had to pick and choose which was the mark that they liked the best. Okay. But the thing that came out of this, when I gave them the price, they accepted it immediately, and I went, "I've left money on the table," because I didn't know how much work. I mean, I was close. Because we're nonprofit, we're not allowed to charge exorbitant rates. So then I said, well, and they said, well, the edition's going to be 100. I said, well, how about if you give us 2 to start a fund for emerging Native American artists? Okay, in other words, help pay their publication costs down faster so that they get their money faster from the sales of prints. They came back and said, we'll give you 10. I went, whew, $1,800 a piece? I'll take it. Those are all sold out. The edition sold out very quickly. They sold them, and we sold our 10 very quickly as well. So we have this fund now to help emerging Native American artists. This is the future. This is Judith Bauman. She's taking my place at the end of the year. She's a Tamron-trained printer, Tamron professional printer. She's a teacher as well, so she's very good at that. And I think I'll be leaving the studio in very good hands. And one of the things, a lot of the things that people ask me is, you know, you're retiring. What are you going to do? That's what I'm going to do. Thank you. Questions again? In actual fact, I've got to use this line. I say I'm going to be a practicing artist with a heavy emphasis on practicing. I do my own art, but in fits and starts because of all the work that's involved here. Crow Shadow comes first. Any questions? Either processes or about the artists or...
I notice you're using the word monotype. There's 2 kinds of typesetting machines, a monotype and a linotype. Monotype sets type 1 letter at a time, but it sets it automatically. That is the same word, isn't it?
I would think so, yes. I'm not that familiar with commercial printing. But we treat monotype as you take any surface, any matrix. In our case, we use plexiglass because you can see through it and you see your inking level.
I don't see why it's type.
Sorry?
I don't see why it's type, monotype.
Monotype. It's been a word that people, they will ink up a surface, print it, and only pull one print and call it a monotype because it's unique, totally unique. Well, we can push that further and run that print through the press 50 times. It's still a monotype because it's still unique because there's not one element that is in the same position. All the mark making is different. Then you might take, there's a residue on the surface, and you run that through the press under a little bit more pressure. The ink has a different quality level. It is a monotype, it's a unique print. It's the same image as the first one, but it's still different because of the inking level. That's the way we would treat monotypes. Okay?
This is Jim, the guy standing up in the...
Hey, Jim.
I had a question. I also was involved in printing, and when we had to put a color on a plate, we would use what they called Pantone matching system, or we would use Toyo matching, which was a different set of base colors, and quite interesting to us because of that different shift. When you're dealing with colors, is it the artist that's mixing them on the palette, or what?
No, you just touched on a very, very interesting story, actually, if you've got a minute. My favorite artist, Marie Watt. Normally what happens when we do mixing colors, I mix the colors because I have to control what goes into them. I have to reproduce those colors exactly when I print the edition. When we're color trial proofing, we only mix enough to try 1 or 2 or 3 sheets of paper, and then I keep enough in reserve so I can match that later on. So traditionally what happens is that the artist says, okay, I want that color and I want that color. Fine, we mix it up. Is that what, yeah, okay, stop, that's where I want that. But I want to add a third color. Okay, now stop. I take a portion of that, do a drawdown, note my mix, which color comes first, which is the second one, which you add to it, and I keep that aside in tin foil so I can match that exactly. Okay, then we add the third color. And sometimes, and that first one, the 2 colors, that's called, I'll label that as base 1. Then we'll add a third color. Okay, I want that, but I want to add something else. Okay, stop. Take a little mix out, that's base number 2. I can match that now. So you do the progression. Normally, artists will nail it in 3 colors. Usually. Marie Watt, I think it was the first time she was there. She was staying upstairs with Jim and his former wife, Roberta. And so we stood there, and somebody introduced her to a Pantone book. I went, no. That's the color I want. Try match that. Okay? So here we are. Oh, she's just add a bit of this, add a bit of this. I can't do that. I've got to be able to replicate this. I stood there for 7 hours. 7 hours. Finally, about 4:30, she says, I think we better call it a day. Okay, so we went home. She went upstairs. Next morning, we came in. She walked in through the doors. Says, Frank, what? I don't think I'm going to use that color. She said, I should have gone with my gut instinct. I said, yes, you should have. We did, and it worked. Pantone colors. Jim Lavador likes using Pantone colors because he just goes through and says, that's what I want. But he's not fussy. It doesn't have to be exact. I just have to capture the essence of that color. It's for commercial printing, where you can get exact amounts of ink or whatever to formulate in these colors. So, yeah, that's my take on Pantone colors.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, Sharon.
And I hope that we've gotten the curiosity of some of you so that you'll go over to Halliford and see the show that is open now. I've been over there and it's exciting. Those of you that have been around ICL for a while, a lot of these names sounded familiar because we've done different programs on the artists of Oregon. And this kind of brings it all home. And hopefully some of you will come on Saturday afternoon to the Paulus Room at the law school for first a lecture and then a panel discussion, including Frank and Marie Watt and James Lavador. Thank you again for coming.
Thank you all.